What was the weirdest thing you ever saw? I was driving with my friends at night when we came to a roundabout with about 15 people, holding hands in a circle, all dressed in white gowns. I slowed up first to see what on earth was going on, but as my headlights hit them they all turned to look at us in unison. When I tell you I have never floored it like I did at that moment, the white-hot panic flushed through all of us. For context, I live in the northwest of England in a very quiet, normal area. It freaked me TF out. There's very little religion here like those in the US, but it really gave me evangelical cult vibes. I was home alone and the whole mobile coat rack just fell over in my little sister's room. The wheels were fine. Weight was distributed evenly. As soon as I walked in my sister's room, it just fell over. I thought someone broke in and ran out the house. Went back to set it up. That thing shouldn't have toppled over. It happened to my mom. She said she walked in there. Bam. She slept over by her mom's house that night because me and my sis were there already. I just asked her and she said there was no logical reason for that thing to have fell over. That house was weird. The 1970s, my brother and I were out in the barnyard scooping up manure by moonlight around 8-ish when we looked up for some reason and saw a nebulous opaque green floating mildly glowing form, like a dense little cloud lit from within green. This was over our little horse farm in Chesterfield, Virginia. There were about 4 of those things, and they hovered up high about 3,000 feet for 20 minutes or so. We called the news and the library the next day, and no one told us anything. They didn't know a thing, they said. First deployment to Kandahar, and I'm walking back to my tent from midnight meal. It's dark and dusty as fuck, so visibility is trash. I see some lights coming out of the haze. It's this Wilford Brimley-looking dude on a unicycle, and he's wrapped in twinkling Christmas tree lights. I have no idea what the fuck they are plugged into, but they are working. He's maintaining a pretty good pace on this unicycle and quickly cycles past. His balance is perfect. I'm dumbstruck and watch him pedal off into the darkness. Lights twinkling. The Crispy family carnival used to open for local punk bands. Crispy himself was a jovial fella with a big mustache whose part in the act involved sword swallowing and lifting a car battery off the stage with chains attached to his nipple rings. When their set was over and preparations for the bands were starting, he'd casually wander around the pit with a stapler so the punks could staple their tips right onto his chest and belly. If you tipped larger bills, he'd let you staple them onto his head instead. Every time I mention it on Reddit, people say it's a glimmer man, but I've never really looked into it. Good distance I saw a blowy humanoid shape wave at me. It was see-through, but had blurry outlines like you'd see in a sci-fi movie when something is cloaked or camouflaged, and that was pretty much it. I was maybe 5 or 6 at the time. Maybe it was my imagination or some trick of the glass doors and windows, but it was rather vivid. I was headed from North Mississippi to Nashville on the Natchez Trace on my motorcycle many years ago. I stopped at a park on the Tennessee River just over the bridge and got off to stretch my legs. A couple of 100 yards down the river were a large group of black folks all dressed in white by the river and 2 in the river with one being baptized by the other. It was a beautiful and serene sight. I watched from a distance for a while and rode on. It was weird to me, but in a comforting kind of way. Me and the friend walking back from his after-school detention UK, and that had the little rounds of gunpowder in them, can't remember the name of them. He aims at us, fires 2 shots, then puts it back in his cuffholder and faces forward, waiting for the train to pass. I don't remember if we said anything to him. I think we were just baffled. We both waited for the train to pass, and he went on his way. Weird. I was in a van at a gas station in Utah and saw a man dressed in one of those flimsy Spider-Man suits. Think pajama level shitty, wobbling around like he's drunk. He goes into the store and a few minutes later comes out with an absolutely gigantic slushy. I'm talking in the gallons, still tottering around like he's very, very drunk or high. He waddles off into the distance, never to be seen again. It was fully in the afternoon and in St. George. I wonder if he is known locally. our little town's version of Comic-Con. I was working literally bartending and witnessed a dude drop to his knees and in less than a blink, lifted the kilt of the man he'd been grinding on and slurped up his dick. This whole thing was less than 5 feet from me. The bass was thumping, but everyone within a 10-foot radius heard kilt guy exclaim, "That's my fucking dick, yo," and then he got into it and the bouncer escorted them to their appropriate room. I was having a hot shower in a closed shower stall one time, and the balance of temperature and airflow must have been just right for this to happen. A single hair was floating in the air, going in circles, round and round, up and down, and every time I thought it would fall down it kept going. It went on for a good few minutes and only ended because I stupidly cracked open the shower door to say, "Hey honey, come look at this." I used to be a land surveyor years ago. My survey crew was deep in the woods discovering boundaries for some farmland and came across 2 perfectly dug 3 feet by 8 holes that looked to be about 6 feet deep. Big piles of dirt next to the holes. There were no standing structures, anything of relevance for quite some distance. So, these definitely came across us to holes that had just been dug and were ready to receive some bodies. Was at a small music event at a popular lakefront. There were no bathrooms, so walked down a path into the woods to go pee. Was super anxious that someone would pass by, so was looking around as I relived myself. Noticed a group of 8 or so men in a circle about 40 feet away. Hurried up and started walking away, but glanced back and realized they had their pants down and were masturbating each other, aka a circle jerk. Back when I worked as an aide in assisted livings, I saw plenty of weird stuff, mostly demented patients doing demented things. Lots of gaunt, dead-eyed people wandering around in the middle of the night, uttering creepy non-sequiturs when asked what they were doing. There's a reason dementia is called that in advanced stages. Its effects can look eerily similar to how demonic possession is portrayed in films. One's on, not really paying attention, because it was our usual path when all of a sudden, I shit you not, I saw maybe 50 people in costume with swords reenacting a battle or something among the trees. I just stared totally dumbstruck for a minute, then ran the heck away. The reenactment cosplay part didn't occur to me until a few minutes later. I went to a place that is famous for its medieval history, and it has a huge fair every year where people dress up in medieval costumes. Walking home late one night, I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I stopped to look, and it was a monk vigorously pounding a nun. It took my drunken self a while to realize what I was witnessing, and that they were both in costume. Or so I hope. Went to a night market in Chiang Rai and grossed out by cockroaches that seemed to be in abundance, so was very wary of anything on the ground and constantly checking below me. Was looking for a table to have a beer. Someone posed a dead rat underneath a chair as if it was bench pressing the chair. I don't know why. I don't know how. I just know I picked a spot a few tables over. Because I actually just messaged another Redditor about this yesterday. 2 separate instances near my house where we saw 8-9 feet figures appearing and disappearing on the golf course across the street from our house. Loud noises, bright lights, tall beings. My GF and I have been afraid to talk about it, but I've seen similar reports online. It legitimately freaked us out and still no idea what it was. I was at work one day when this guy came in. He was the type you had to watch carefully. Anyway, when I asked how I could help him, he turned to look at me, and he was foaming at the mouth. I called my manager up, and he was trying to talk to him. The guy swallowed the foam and asked for a bag. When my manager handed it to him, the guy was carrying a toothbrush. Guess he didn't spit. I was at a stoplight once. I looked up at the surrounding buildings, and on 3rd story of an apartment over a store there is a morbidly obese woman standing naked, with her hands on her hips, just standing still on display to the whole world like an act of defiance. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at, and the light was green. I wonder how long she was standing there. When I was 8, my granddad died soon after, before he was cremated. I was visiting my gran, and I saw him walk into their bedroom wearing a nightgown. I ran to my mother and told her, and she said she could smell his cologne in the hall where I had just seen him. I'm not a religious person, and I don't even trust that it wasn't grief mixed with imagination, but it felt very real. A floating thing in the sky that was completely engulfed in flames. It was about 2,000 feet up, just floating there. When I used to take my dogs for a walk, I used to leave my phone at home. Not anymore. No idea what it was. But at the time I felt like the flames part of how it operated. A guy at work told me his kids saw it too. But they saw windows. I did not see windows. A very heavy woman in a bikini walked in, pulled an entire display off the counter, watched it hit the ground and shatter, sending glass shards everywhere, and then she just got in her car and left. No words were exchanged at any point, and she didn't look angry. It was like she drove to 711 to do this one specific thing and leave. I've seen some odd things in my 50 years on this earth, but the weirdest was a dog with his paws on the steering wheel in an 80s Cadillac at a stoplight. My friend and I pulled up to the light, looked at the car on our left, and there it was. We couldn't see anyone else in the vehicle. It was creepy as hell, and we left when the light changed. So there's a transgender homeless crazy person in the city where I live, where everything below the neck is womanly except the head, which is completely manly. Like there's boobs, hips, and shaved legs. But then you get to the head and there's a beard, hard lines, and a manly smell. No one believes me when I see this person. I once saw a horrible, violent situation between two men. See a glitter-dusted man in gold hot pants running for his life straight up the middle of the road from an enormous drag queen in both height and girth, still in full costume and armed with a machete. I was sobering through a town hours away from where I live near the coast. Saw a man walking his cow through downtown. This was a very small coastal town, and the cow was on a leash in the middle of town. I had to drive round the block to make sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. It wasn't.